All-Star game this Sunday, but the Chicago Bulls, yeah, they were already on break.
The Celtics are sending Drew Holiday to Portland for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round draft picks.
Breaking news out of the association surrounding the Boston Celtics.
The Celtics have traded Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks.
50 for Jaylen Brown. This is Pritchard time. The crowd can sense it. Over 3 Bulls.
Great in and out dribble. Oh! He set off the smoke detector!
What's up, everyone, and welcome in to your Celtics source on this late Wednesday evening after the Boston Celtics just obliterate the Chicago Bulls. Wasn't much of a fight from Chicago. They're definitely a team that is trying to tank now, rebuild their team. They have a bunch of guards that don't play much defense. But that being said, it was a much-needed win for the Celtics. Coming off of the Knicks game, obviously, where they struggled offensively and defensively to an extent. But more importantly, you're coming off of a bunch of days of rest that were much needed. And you just see the level of effort and execution from this team when you get a couple days off. And I know that, they had a pretty dominant January for the most part. But it doesn't matter who you're playing. You need a couple days off here and there. And the Celtics, they were playing every other day throughout the month of January. And this is the first stretch that, you got time to have an actual practice. You got time to, get some rest, recover, but also, incorporate the new players, right? This is the first time that Nikola Vučević has had a full practice now. And it just, made a big difference. You saw in the Miami game, in the Knicks game especially, he was out there playing basketball, and, he was okay here and there just because he has a great knowledge of the game, given his veteran status. But you can see, he looked lost sometimes out there, and he didn't know, what he should be doing in this Celtics, scheme, in this Celtics game plan, right? It's one thing to be out there, chucking shots and making your shots, but you can't help a team when you don't know, how to specifically fit in to what the team is asking you to do. And now we saw after, a couple days of practice that Nikola Vučević looked so much better. Not only on his pick and pop shooting, right? He was setting good screens and then able to get out of those screens quickly. And Payton Pritchard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown knew to find him for those pick and pop threes. But he was also great in the post. Basically, locking out his defenders, getting good positioning under the rim, and just exposing, mismatches. We saw a couple times that Anthony Simons, right? Obviously, Anthony Simons making his, return to the Garden, and the Celtics, didn't hesitate to attack him and show why, he can only be a good defensive player when he's on the Celtics. But that being said, right, Nikola Vučević often would screen Anthony Simons underneath the basket, and Jaylen Brown just an easy lob in that Vucevic was able to seal and then go up for and ones or just, easy layups. Often, at that point, if you're the guard or the smaller guy, you just get out of the way and let him make the dunk so you don't, risk the and one. But he was also did a great job of passing from the perimeter. 2 great backdoor cuts from Jordan Walsh where Nikola Vučević was able just to sort of thread the needle right in between 2 Bulls players for a great dunk from Jordan Walsh. And we're going to talk about Jordan Walsh in just a second because Jordan Walsh had a great sort of revival game, I'm going to say, because he's been sort of out of the lineup over the last, multiple games or so. But, the combination of the athleticism and energy from this team being able to move off the ball and not just standing in the corner like they did in the Knicks game. They looked tired in the Knicks game. Despite getting open shots. And now I think a lot of those open shots just come from the fact that the Knicks are just not a great defensive team with Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. But that being said, nothing was working for them in the Knicks game. And you just saw in this game, definitely against a weaker opponent on both sides of the ball, but the Celtics, didn't hesitate to take advantage of that. And that's, something that, over the last, multiple games, they did drop a game to some inferior opponents, the Hawks game specifically. But then they get right back in track, and they never lose 2 games in a row. That's what's great about this team. They lose a tough one. They get right back in the lab, in the Auerbach Center, getting to work, incorporating the new guys. Obviously, the Jayson Tatum situation and his, practicing was also a big storyline of this last couple of games here. But you could just see coming right out of the gun, nothing, was going to stop them tonight, especially Jaylen Brown. And, Jaylen Brown, he only finishes with 24 points, in 29 minutes, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 9 of 20 from the field. So he wasn't great late in this game. I think a lot of that, fourth quarter, he missed, probably like 4 or 5 shots in a row where he was just, throwing it up. It was really a 30-point game. Didn't really matter at that point. So you look at Jaylen Brown and you're like, yeah, at first glance, it wasn't super efficient. But he had it all. He had it going early in this game, and then he didn't really need to show up in the third quarter, and so he didn't. It's not like he was like, we've seen from teams or from this Celtics team, from players, they'll have a great first half, and then they'll come out in the third quarter, and you need them to step up, and they're just nowhere to be found. It wasn't one of those games for Jaylen Brown. It was one of those games where he didn't need to be there. He didn't need to, just pose his athleticism, his aggressiveness, and so he just stood around and, let other guys go to work, let Jordan Walsh get his moment to shine, let Baylor Shireman get his moment to shine, Nikola Vučević hitting pick and pop threes, and, we talked about his presence underneath. Right, and so Jaylen Brown, he was like, yeah, I'm going to the All-Star break. All-Star game. I'm already on, my break. I'll just finish this game out, score a couple buckets when I need to, and get on with the rest of my life. It really wasn't a hard game for Jaylen Brown in any way. Right, but Jaylen Brown, he set the tone early. The Celtics have really struggled over the last, in this, I'm not going to say it's a losing streak, because it hasn't been a losing streak, but this maybe subpar offensive stretch where they're still winning games, but their offense hasn't, peaked maybe the way we were hoping it to be. And, some of that is the struggles of Derek White, although he's looked better as of recently. Cross my fingers, because we know, Derek White has had a super up and down roller coaster season. But some of that has also been in the fact that they haven't been able to, score in the first quarter. They've had some bad openings, statements where they go down 20 early to start the game. Joe Mazzulla hasn't been able to find a line. Not that it's his fault, but just, the guys haven't been able to score without Payton Pritchard in the lineup to start. And Payton Pritchard had to come in early, and then the offense has sort of kick-started. The spark plug in Payton Pritchard comes on, and the offense sort of figures it out, and they go on to win the game. But you're getting these really bad first quarters and really first halves, right? We saw that in the Miami game, right? Just a first half in general. The Knicks game as well, right? They shot better in the second half, I thought, in the Knicks game, but they just dug themselves too big of a hole in the first half. But both these games, and really over the last 4, 5, 6 games maybe, they really have not been able to get it going in the first quarter. And so I thought it was great that Jaylen Brown was able to come out and not shoot his way to a good first quarter, but, aggressively drive to the rim, aggressively, basically expose the interior defense of the Chicago Bulls and get to the rim for powerful dunks, powerful layups, and ones. That was the way to, get your offense going, because the shooting came later in this game, right? But sometimes, you don't know if your shooting's going to work, right? Sometimes the Celtics have had very streaky games, or sometimes they've missed lots of threes, and it seems like it's contagious. And so Jaylen Brown going to the rim and not, having to rely on his perimeter shooting just allows the offense to get in a much better flow, and allows Jaylen Brown to be consistent, but also generate offense easily, right? Because sometimes, as I said, right, the Celtics don't have it going shooting-wise, right? We saw in that Knicks game they could not make a shot. But had Jaylen Brown, instead of just chucking up threes in the corner, drove to the rim repeatedly, maybe that would have allowed, more open looks. Maybe that would have allowed some of the guys to get into a rhythm because of the presence and the pressure that Jaylen Brown is putting on that defense, and maybe that could have gotten them back into the game. So just a great job from Jaylen Brown in this game of taking advantage of that. And, Payton Pritchard, I think has had, I'm not going to say the sacrifice, but he has been the one that Joe Mazzulla has decided that, without Anthony Simons, Payton Pritchard needs to be the guy off the bench. And, right, you need someone to carry that second unit offensively. And what it's done is, the second unit has been okay offensively, but what it's done is it's just extremely, dismantled the starting unit offense, as we had mentioned earlier, right? It's basically led the Celtics to start very slow sometimes. And so you're looking for Jaylen Brown to now pick it up, Derek White to pick it up, and be able to, basically handle the first 4 minutes of the game, get your team ready to go, get them into the game quickly, and then that allows Payton Pritchard to come in and does what he does every night. And it doesn't matter whether he's playing a good defense, a bad defense, he just dominates guys that are 6'11 and taller. He just dominates at 6'1", whatever he is. He just comes in and just bullies centers. I don't know how he does it. We talk about this every time, but his ability just to come in and just push these bigger guys around, get to a spot in the paint for these, easy layups, these mid-range shots, these spin arounds, these step throughs, all his stuff in the paint is just incredible to see how he's able to do that at such a disadvantage, height-wise, right? And obviously he has the shooting as well, that when that's going, he's one of the best players in the league. In this game, he was just dominant off the bench, came in and just added to what Jaylen Brown was already doing. In this game, he had 26 points in 34 minutes. Obviously, probably the last 12 minutes, probably the last 8 minutes of those were those garbage time fourth quarter minutes where he was just, out there facilitating wise. He wasn't really, out there getting his shot. He was out there allowing guys like Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, guys like Baylor Shireman to just have a practice session really out there in the fourth quarter because they weren't playing much defense on the Bulls side, right? But Payton Pritchard in this game, along with the 26 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, and, it was a rough turnover game from him. A couple, bad passes and whatever. I didn't think, it's a very uncharacteristic game for him turnover-wise. I didn't think that it, affected the game too much given how dominant the Celtics were anyway. Just something to keep in mind when you look at, his box score on this game and you look at, how good he's been this season. It's because he doesn't turn the ball over, and he was good again in this game. But there isn't. I'm not gonna say like I was mad at him or anything. It was just a couple plays here that you might want to have back, especially against a better opponent where you're not going to be getting as easy looks as you did. But Payton Pritchard, right? You love to see him getting other guys involved. You love to see him getting rebounds as well, right? So much of Payton Pritchard's game, it's not just the scoring, it's the facilitating, the playmaking, as we saw in that fourth quarter, right? You don't have a lot of guys. The Celtics, for being such a good offense this year, are actually, I think they are the worst team in terms of number of assists per game, right? They just really don't pass the ball around. Not that they don't pass the ball around, but they don't, their points don't come from assists. It's a lot of ISO, but also, a lot of, a pass, but then the pass goes to a dribble, and so the assist doesn't quite count, right? So you get assists, or I guess the pass sets up the scoring opportunity, but, it doesn't go down in the box score as a assist, right? And so it's great to see Payton Pritchard, being that facilitator, getting assists, because the Celtics do have a hard time, at least, from a box score standpoint, of generating plays with their passing, not just their one-on-one offensive pressure, which obviously the Celtics have a lot of those guys, and Jayson Tatum will only add to that. right? Yeah, other guys to talk about in this game. We talked about Nikola Vučević. We talked about Payton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, Jordan Walsh, who was definitely the benefactor of some great playmaking from all the guys we have mentioned above. But Jordan Walsh, I think, with the emergence of Baylor Shireman, especially, right, and his shooting abilities and him playing good defense, Hugo Gonzalez, right, and his ability to knock down a couple threes, but also, play just great on-ball defense and also have the height to block shots and contest shots at the rim, also get rebounds, right, has sort of, and also, Anthony Simons, who, had become a better defender and obviously has that elite package offensively. We saw Jordan Walsh, he had those 20 or so games back in December where he was just a fantastic fit in the starting, But in January, with all the guys that we just mentioned, he had started to take a step back and, he wasn't playing as much, whether he should be playing or not. You didn't see him get, a run where he could, showcase his talent. And this is the first game in a while where we got to see that talent, where Joe Mazzulla gave him the start early, or I guess not start, but gave him the run early, right? And we saw him take advantage of that, right? I have no doubt that Jordan Walsh has turned a corner, right? We saw, the first 2 years of his career in Boston was really much a struggle. And now I think he has turned a corner. I have no doubt about that he can be a great piece on a championship team, great role player. And, he's making his shots, and obviously his defense is elite. He had a great steal and transition dunk against Anthony Simons in this game, where he stripped the ball and was able to chase it down and then get the runaway dunk. Right, so that's never going to be in doubt that he's going to come in and become a great defense. And I think part of the problem is that maybe he's not quite up to the level offensively as a Baylor Shireman. I do think he's pretty similar to Hugo Gonzalez, maybe not quite there. And, right, the Celtics have struggled so much offensively that maybe that has allowed Joe Mazzulla, or I guess forced Joe Mazzulla to go with more offensive guys that might not have the same talent defensively. But this was a game where, the offense wasn't hard to come by, and so you're allowed to, afford, or you can afford to, if you're Joe Mazzulla, to put in Jordan Walsh, and see what you got offensively, right? You're going to get the defense. That isn't a problem. And he takes advantage of his opportunity offensively in this game. So just an impressive game from from Jordan Walsh. And I do think, I don't know what's, the next game is, a week and a day away against Golden State, in Golden State, right next, or a week from Thursday, right? So that's a long time away. We who knows what Joe Mazzulla will be thinking by then. I'm sure they're going to have, I know they get this time off, but I'm sure they're going to have a practice, or two maybe before. I don't know what time everyone, or what day everyone gets back, but my guess is they'll have a practice before, and who knows whether Joe Mazzulla will be thinking about Jordan Walsh at that point. But my guess is with his, performance today, Jordan Walsh will get another run, early, or I guess early, after the All-Star break. And it will just be up to him to showcase whether he can get back into that rotation, or Joe Mazzulla is going to stick with guys like Hugo Gonzalez and Baylor Shireman, right? Yeah, I'm going to wrap up this game conversation. We're going to sort of move on and quickly talk about the All-Star game and a little bit of Jayson Tatum, and then we're going to wrap it up as we are going to do a full first half of the season recap later this week, probably coming out Saturday morning, right, sort of a podcast episode there. But yeah, the All-Star game, right, is this Sunday. I'm not going to share my thoughts on what I think of All-Star weekend. I think, pretty much a joke at this point, but it's nice that Jaylen Brown, gets to go and he gets to be a starter. USA versus World format, three teams, 2 USA, 1 World. So, that's the format and whatever. They'll do a little, tournament there. Ron Harper Jr. is going as a Rising Stars. He's also going to be participating in the skills tournament with his brother in San Antonio and his dad as well, who we all know is a champion with the Chicago Bulls, multiple-time champion with the Chicago Bulls. So that'll be fun to watch, just to check out. And obviously it's nice for Jaylen Brown to get the recognition for his MVP season that he is having. Big Perk today was talking about how he is his top choice for MVP. And obviously, it comes down to, how many games each of those, guys, that would technically probably be above him, Nikola Vučević, SGA. I do believe Jokic can only miss one more game before he's ineligible for awards. LeBron actually, is now no longer able to win all NBA awards at the end of the season, which snapped his 21-year streak. That's just incredible. Another record that LeBron holds that will almost certainly never be broken. But that being said, it's just, a fantastic year for Jaylen Brown, and I think, I don't know if I'll have him first right now. I do think SGA is probably still first. We'll see how many more games he misses. He might be out by then. Cade Cunningham definitely has to be up there. But yeah, I'd probably have right now, I'd probably put Cade Cunningham and Jaylen Brown 1 and 2, assuming SGA's, out of the question. Now, if he's in, I still think you just put SGA just because the Thunder are far and away have the best record and whatever. But that's for, down the road. As for now, Jayson Tatum, they play, I do believe they go on the road to start their stretch after the All-Star break, and then they come back home for a game. I forget who they're playing. I can pull up the schedule here and see who they play after the All-Star break. But I know they have one home game against the, let's see here. They play the Nets, right? So that's February 27th. And we're looking here right now on February 11th. And that is, 2-3 weeks away. Is he ready in 3 weeks? I don't know. I don't know if he's ready in 3 weeks. Obviously, he played 5-on-5, and in theory, that's one of these sort of close steps to being back on the court. Kristaps Porzingis was back on the court 8 games after playing with, or maybe it was 8 days after playing with the G League team. But obviously, a totally different situation. But that being said, if he's not ready by then, you go back on the road, and then you play Charlotte on March 4th. And that is a game right around his birthday. Obviously, they're on the road, or I guess they're not on the road, but they have that off day. So I'm wondering if Charlotte against the Charlotte Hornets, a team that I know Charlotte's playing well right now, but who knows that far down the road. But, in theory, that's a game that you should be able to win pretty easily. It's a home game. Jayson Tatum has said he wants to make his return at home. I'm circling that game as the game that Jayson Tatum returned. And, we have to wait and see. It remains to be seen whether he still will return this season. I think, at this point it is pretty certain that he's going to return, even after those comments a couple of weeks ago on the Pivot podcast. But I think at this point we saw the practice. We saw his willingness to do a press conference. That's very rare that you see a guy that is not even technically, not even, hinted at coming back, right? You don't usually see him do a press conference. The fact that he was willing to do a press conference shows you that maybe, there's something brewing here. So just something to keep an eye on. And obviously, whenever he makes his return or says he's going to return, we will go live with an instant reaction talking about it and what this means for a team in a conference that is wide open. I haven't seen a conference wide open in a while. Yes, the Pistons are really good, but they're unproven in the playoffs. The Knicks have their ups and downs. They beat the Celtics, and then they get, pretty easily handled by the Indiana Pacers in overtime, a team that has the worst offense in the NBA. And so, overall, I'm scared for the Knicks and the Pistons, but I think the Celtics can handle them with the Jayson Tatum, or without, but definitely with the Jayson Tatum. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, the Celtics just absolutely dominate the Chicago Bulls. Was not a close game from any standpoint. They win 124-105. Wasn't even really that close. But yeah, the next game is a week from Thursday against the Golden State Warriors. We're going to have all-star coverage and obviously a podcast episode dropping this weekend covering the first half of the season. And follow on social media. Check out the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, please hit the like button on your way out, and go Celtics.